Hey, what's up? Quick break to tell you about Vroom. Looking for a new car? With Vroom, you can shop thousands of cars right from your phone and have your next ride delivered straight to you. It feels like every time I've ever tried to buy a new car, it's always such a time-consuming process. And there's pressure to make sure you get the right one. Now, Vroom is a better way to buy your next ride. You never have to haggle or negotiate the price of a car, so you know you're getting a good deal. With thousands of cars available on Vroom.com, you can make sure to get the ride you really want so you don't have to settle. You have a full week or 250 miles, whichever comes first, to make sure your new ride is right for you. Plus, all cars on Vroom.com come with a 90-day limited warranty and 1 year of roadside assistance nationwide, giving you peace of mind while you're on the road. You can even trade in your old car when you buy your new one, or just sell your car to Vroom. When you sell your car on Vroom.com, you get a price instantly, and they'll even come pick it up. Simply put, Vroom is a better way to buy a car. So if you're a motorhead and you're looking for something unique, or you're a busy parent who's always on the go, and either way, if you don't have time to shop for a new car the old way, don't hesitate. Just visit Vroom.com. You can buy a car from Vroom entirely online. So next time you need to buy a new car, just grab your phone, go to Vroom.com, and check out thousands of cars.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about the new 2024 commit to the Michigan State Spartans, power forward Jesse McCulloch. Before we begin, just want to make a quick reminder for you that if you've not yet subscribed to the show, please be sure you do so on your podcast player. Also, you can leave a written review for the show. It's super helpful for other Spartan fans to find our show. If you leave a 5-star written review, please take a screenshot of it, send it to me at eric@tffinots.com. You can get you a $5 gift certificate for nudge printing, and so you can get some cool Spartan paraphernalia. So let's talk about the new commitment. This is the second commitment to the Michigan State class. Jesse McCulloch will join Kur Teng, who committed 2 weeks ago or so, I think.
Yep.
McCulloch is a power forward, 4-star, top 100 recruit. He's the number 11 ranked center. This is all via On3. He's the number 1 player in Ohio, 6'9", over 7-foot wingspan, hailing from Lutheran East. And I guess this is one that we sort of knew was going to happen. You suspected it when we last talked about Kur Teng that McCulloch would be the second piece of the pie. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about what this means for Michigan State?
Well, it's another good get and seemingly a guy that fits the mold that Tom Izzo has established for his program, both in terms of his skill set and kind of where he seems to fit personality wise. And we'll start with the latter part first. The reason I say that is you've seen interviews out there, not just today, but in previous weeks, where not just Jesse himself, but his family has talked about the aspects of Michigan State's program that they gravitated to. That, we hear this over and over from recruits, the family atmosphere.
Yeah. Right.
Also that players are held accountable, that, you're going to be coached hard, but they know that coming in. They also know that Izzo cares. Seth Davis just did a great piece today, as a side note to this discussion in today's Athletic. And if you're a subscriber and you haven't seen it, I strongly urge you to check it out because it was great. It laid all of this stuff out. He had quotes from both Malik Hall and Tyson Walker, and also Xavier Booker. All things we've heard said before, but it relates to this recruitment in some ways too. That they all talked about. Well, the two guys who've been in the program talked about how Tyson talked about how it took him a while to adjust to the intensity, but once he did, he got on the same page. And I've heard Izzo say this spring that Tyson is dialed in to where Izzo wants him in a fantastic level right now. And that usually happens with upperclassmen point guards at Michigan State.
Yeah.
You know, it's not uncommon. Malik Hall said something about how Izzo was constantly checking in with him about his health. And what was unsaid, but I think was obviously implied, is it wasn't just, you know, hey, are you good to go tomorrow? It was deeper. It was
Right,
deeper than that.
Yeah.
And he said something about how, you know, it may come in strange ways, but he definitely lets you know how much he cares about you as a person. And then Xavier Booker was quoted, something we've seen from him and his parents and his AAU coaches, a lot of people around him, about Xavier said, look, the reason I picked Michigan State is I want to be coached hard. So all of those themes seem to resonate in Jesse McCulloch's recruitment too. So I think he checked all those, you know, our kind of guy boxes that Michigan State has, right? On the court, he's very much a fit for the kind of player. And look, Michigan State is not unique in the sense that everybody wants longer guys who have the ability to shoot. You know, that's a very common, but Michigan State has prioritized those kind of players maybe a little bit longer than some other people have, particularly the shooting part. They've always, you know, going back to AJ Granger, Izzo, you know, the very beginning of Izzo's tenure, he's wanted those kinds of players in his program. That's part of what he wants his offense to do, has always asked big men, at least one of them, to be capable of stretching the floor. And so McCulloch absolutely fits that mold. He's 6'9", as you said, he's got a 7-foot plus wingspan. So that suggests that he may be able to provide some rim protection, which is good. I'm not expecting Jaren Jackson, but I think he can be effective there. Offensively, you know, what you hear about him, and I'll candidly admit I have not seen him play live yet, but what you hear about him is definitely that he is the stretch element. He's considered to be a very good shooter. And if you look at clips that are available on YouTube, you will find that. You will find shots of Jesse McCulloch hitting threes and hitting jumpers. So that's real. But he isn't just purely a stretch guy. Like, there's the potential to do some damage in the post. Now, he's got to get, as is often the case with bigs at this age, he's got to get stronger. You know, he's 6'9", he's maybe about 210-ish. So we're talking about a guy who might be marginally stronger, bigger than Xavier Booker, but not by a lot. So there's going to have to be physical development, particularly in terms of what he may be able to do on the interior and, you know, defensively, how he can hang in there, et cetera. If you look at things positionally, my inclination is that just as with Xavier Booker, I think Jesse McCulloch primarily has been recruited to play the 4, but we are in this era where, you know, sometimes you have to go with a small ball lineup. Sometimes it's because you want to take advantage of a mismatch. Sometimes it's because you've got to match up to what an opponent is doing. So, you know, and we've talked about Booker pretty much exclusively as a 4 because that's where I think he'll primarily help. But is there the possibility that Booker could play some small ball 5 this year? Yeah. I mean, I guess I can't rule that out. So by the same token, is there the possibility that when Jesse McCulloch gets here, that he could play some small ball 5? Yeah, I guess there is. You have to always keep that stuff in mind. But I think primarily you're not looking at a guy that they're long. You know, when I look at somebody like Flory Badinga in this class, that's a 5 man. Pretty clearly, that's no question, a 5.
Yeah.
McCulloch, I certainly don't think he's exclusively a 5. And I would tend to lean more toward them using him as a 4, but really it could end up that we're just splitting hairs here. Other points of note with him, he won a state championship this year in Ohio, playing for Lutheran East. in Cleveland or Cleveland area. He's the first Cleveland area recruit that Michigan State has landed, I believe, since Delvon Rowe. So it's been a while. But Cleveland, Cleveland as a city doesn't necessarily produce as much talent as perhaps it once did. It's not like there are just, Big Ten, high level Big Ten players coming out of that city every year. But nevertheless, it's been a while. I mean, believe it or not, it's 16 years between those classes, which, boy, you want to start feeling old. Think about that. Because it doesn't seem that long ago for Delvon Rowe, but he's the class of 2008. He was in the same class with Draymond Green and Corey Lucius. And it's a long time ago. So the first one from that area since Delvon, Jesse McCulloch. And in AAU, if any of our listeners are in cities where some of these big EYBL events or tournaments later in the spring, summer are happening, Jesse McCulloch is playing for Indy Heat, Spice Indy Heat, which is one of the long-standing cornerstone programs of the Nike wing of AAU basketball. And it's a high-profile team. A lot of talents come through there. I said he's the first guy from Cleveland in a while to come to Michigan State, but he's certainly not the first guy to come from Spice Indy Heat. I'm trying to think. The last one, I think, I may be missing somebody, but I think the last one was Marcus Bingham, who was a year after Jaren Jackson. So MSU definitely has a relationship. Xavier Tillman played for them as well, his last year in AAU. So there have been a lot of Michigan State guys that have gone through the Spice Indy Heat program. So not unusual that he's there. Also worth noting that a couple of 2025 guys that Michigan State is recruiting, the Harrelson kid, who's a 6'7" point guard, top 10 player in his class nationally, and then a 6'8" forward, Trent Sisley, both of whom are from the state of Indiana, are playing up on that same team, that same 17 under team. So plenty of Michigan State fan interest in watching Spice Indy Heat this year.
Yeah, so a couple of things, I think about it. It's with the nature of the sport now, especially with roster. We just had a couple of shows we talked about just the rosters changing the Big Ten, and I got to imagine from a coach's standpoint, it's very difficult to try and project in the future. I mean, even the next year is hard enough, and especially 2 years from now, you can easily say, well, there's not going to be a spot for so and so, but there could be, or there might not be, right? I mean,
right.
And I also think, you look at Joey Hauser, I think is interesting because I'm sure when he was recruited, he was never envisioned to be playing the 5. And yet he played the 5 a decent amount the previous year. He'd play not sparingly sometimes, before when Bingham and Marble were there. So and that's why you see a player like this and you think, well, you could definitely see the versatility is helpful that he could play the 4 and then probably, spot time at this 5 if needed. Do you have a feel for his game? Because I feel like as with Bingham, he was not a guy who really could do anything inside much. He had really very little post game. Do you get the impression that he has more of that to his game than Marcus did?
I'm under the impression he has more. And if you look at his clips, you see some evidence of it. Now, does he have to get stronger in order to really max that out? Oh yeah. But Marcus Bingham was a guy who was really just pretty much exclusively a face-up player, really until his senior year at Michigan State. I mean, it took him that long to really develop a semblance of a post game, but you have to be careful with that stuff because you never can tell. I mean, that was the same knock on Jaren Jackson. And yet when Jaren Jackson got to East Lansing, over just that one-off season, he put on a lot of good weight. And while he wasn't a low post destroyer, he still isn't. He definitely had a lot more in the post than I think people had imagined when he signed. So you never can tell for sure. And I mean, Xavier Booker's another guy. People think of him pretty much exclusively as a face-up guy. And maybe that's how he'll end up playing as a freshman, but I don't try to write that chapter just yet because things, including time, has to play out. And
Yeah, he has a whole year left before he comes to campus.
Well, this kid does. Yeah, has a whole other year. I was talking about Booker, though. Booker's got a whole off season, but in Jesse McCulloch's case, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're talking, 13, 14 months before he ever shows up on campus, and about 4 or 5 months longer than that till he plays a game. So a lot can change. But yeah, to answer your question, that's what I was saying at the outset. I think he does have more inside outside potential, but how much of that gets realized at Michigan State is depending upon a lot to do with development.
Sure. And in some respects, I suppose the role that is needed on the team for that season or the seasons that he's playing too.
Right. Like, how he's playing and, who he's playing against and a lot of different things that are, as with everything else these days, it's just very, very difficult to project out a whole hell of a lot, Yeah.
And I don't recall when Booker committed last year, but I feel like it was later in the summer.
It was. Michigan State didn't get any commitments. They had Jeremy Fears, obviously, way early, but they didn't have any commitments until, I want to say, Xavier was July, maybe.
Yeah, because I think it was late. It was maybe August when then you had the other two dominoes of Carr and Norman to come down. So I guess the other thing is when you look at Booker's recruitment, and I think this is it was a little bit delayed, but his assessment, at least before the summer AAU, was much different than it was, before it started. And so I know right now, I've seen.
You mean where he was rated?
Where he's rated,
yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And so his evaluation is like, oh, he's like a top 50 guy. And then by the time like summer's over, like, oh, this guy's like top 10 or top 5. And I know that people are a little concerned. Oh, he's, only top 100, which is funny.
Morons are concerned. Let's call it what it is. Morons are concerned. Anyway.
It is the curse of the blessed with plenty, right? Like,
we're
only stuck with the top.
I want to address that. If you're bitching about Michigan State getting a consensus top 100 guy, jump in a lake.
We have all kinds of beautiful lakes in the state of Michigan.
Take advantage. Jump in a lake. Don't come back up. Anyway.
Right. So, I mean, that's I guess the question is, and I guess you don't really know until you watch him play and how he plays this summer and sort of how he moves. The assumption would be that the coaching staff expects him to develop even more over the next year. And so I don't know did people see Booker in the spring become what he was at the end of the summer, as far as evaluation? And
that's where it started. It pretty much with Booker, the reevaluation of Booker and his was more of a roller coaster ride because he'd had, I don't know about rankings, but he certainly had a lot of elite level programs interested in him early. And then he had kind of a rough junior year in his high school play at times where a lot of that interest, he talked about this, a lot of those schools sort of peeled off, but Michigan State stayed interested. And so then when he hit the spring, basically right where we are now, but last year, he just started dominating in some of these AAU events that he played in. And that caused two things happened. One, just his play and his potential, maybe that's the better word, caused people to reevaluate. But part of that also is the 2023 class is not considered to be a great one in terms of, depth or even superstar talent level at the high end. So that's why you started seeing, it's very unusual that a guy like Booker, who a lot of the basketball community thinks will not be an immediately dominating player in college, how a guy like that would ever be top 10 or at some points was number 1 by certain services. Well, part of that is this class just lacks superstars. There's very good players. And I think all the guys Michigan State signed, I'm really excited to see. And there will be lots of other good players around the country, but it doesn't have those guys at the top that you're used to seeing. Even when people talk about, people like DJ Wagner. DJ Wagner got beaten out by Jeremy Fears for the starting point guard slot on Team USA last year. Mm-hmm. So if you want to make DJ Wagner into a superstar, what's Jeremy Fears? That's kind of my point, is that it lacks those obvious guys. So that's why a guy like Book could get into that kind of discussion. But yeah, it really started to take off for him in the spring. And so I assume where you're going with this is, well, might the same potential exist for McCulloch? And I would never say somebody ranked in the 90s has a great chance to become a top 10 guy or a McDonald's All-American, but there's certainly reason to think that McCulloch will have opportunity to rise up the rankings. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, he's a guy that a program like Michigan State prioritized. And just as we see this in football, sometimes people complain about, the bump a kid gets in the rankings when Michigan lands them, right? Well, there is such a thing at times with Michigan State in basketball. It does happen. And sometimes it's, also because the player is just shown a lot more. But for example, ESPN released their final 2023 rankings. Cohen Carr was ranked 24th.
Oh, he was like 80th.
That's the high, right?
Kind of like
and look, he's shown a lot, so I think that's merited. Frankly, when I watch a McDonald's All-American game, I didn't see anybody in that game who does the things Cohen Carr does, physically, no. But but anyway, it goes to show you it can happen. Jesse McCulloch has a chance. One, because again, this 2024 class is not considered to be a great one by historical standards. So there may be more of an opportunity with a lot more uncertainty than you'd usually see. But the other thing is, and a Michigan State bump too, but the other thing is, he's playing for a very high profile program. As I mentioned, you play for Spiece Indy Heat, people will see those games. You are not, and that's the amazing thing about Xavier Booker, is that he did it not playing on the EYBL circuit or the Adidas circuit. He was playing on the New York to LA, which is the grassroots circuit that, doesn't tend to get the kind of attention from scouts, from the national guys who cover recruiting that the shoe circuits do. But Jesse McCulloch is not going to have any problem being seen. He will be seen. He's playing for a high profile team and a good team. And so you never know for sure, especially with bigger guys. It's such a guard dominant. Every element of basketball is guards are really important, but in AAU, it's really critical, because if you've got guards that are really interested primarily in showing what they can do individually, it can be very hard for bigs to get enough touches. So it remains to be seen how that'll work out. But I know the 2025 guys he's playing with, particularly Harrelson, are viewed extremely. They are serious prospects, and so he'll have opportunities to move up. Wouldn't be surprising to see him move up. But even if he doesn't, man, I can check off. You want to know where Denzel Valentine was ranked when he came out of high school? You want to know where Xavier Tillman was ranked when he came out of high school? I mean, I can go on and on.
Are you saying rankings don't portend to success? And they may.
Well, that they're not. Basically, if you're a top 100 kid, period, you have potential to be a very good player. And if Michigan State zeroes in on you and accepts a commitment from you this early in the process, what that tells you is that, for whatever it's worth, they think that player, because look, they don't need to take a commitment. They could say, we're not ready. They took the commitment. So they obviously believe Jesse McCulloch is the real deal. You look at his offer list, and his final four came down to MSU, Alabama, Xavier, and Virginia Tech, but he had offers from Michigan, Ohio State. This kid has the offer list of a guy that has the potential to be a high-level Big Ten player at some point. There's no doubt about that. Whether he becomes that or not, Marcus Bingham was ranked, in the 60s, I think, by the time he committed to MSU in the summer of 2017. How long did it take him to become a reliable Big Ten level player? Basically until his senior year. Yeah, so you never can tell. Sure. But I do think a guy, for what it's worth, I think a kid like McCulloch seems further along in that development process. Probably doesn't have the upside that someone like Bingham had, because Bingham was 7 feet tall, 7'4" wingspan, maybe a little bit better athlete. So there were reasons why Marcus Bingham was perceived to have maybe a higher ceiling. But I would expect Jesse McCulloch has a better chance to help earlier. He seems a little bit further down that developmental curve.
Sure. Yeah, and it's easy to forget, how many Power 5 schools are there? There are, 60, I'm guessing? Maybe more, 70? And so, your top 100, assuming all those teams take one, that still uses up almost the, a lot of the top 100, right?
Michigan State this year, and I got to think this through, other than Tyson Walker, I'm thinking of their scholarship players
who were top 100.
Tyson Walker and Carson Cooper. That should be it. Everybody else was top 100. Mm-hmm. So it's normal, and so that doesn't mean that it's a lock. There've been a lot of top 100 guys Michigan State's gotten over the years that didn't end up becoming impact guys. But basically,
sure,
the way you should assess it is, if you're viewed at that level, that player has a legitimate chance to be a really good collegiate player. That's how you should view it. Like it's not definitive proof it's going to happen, but it suggests that the potential is there.
All right. Well, we're going to step away for just a moment before we continue the discussion and talk a little bit how this affects the rest of the 2024 recruitment process.
When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. And something that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy, because candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in a search, according to U.S. Indeed data. So join over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you need to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/Blue Wire to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. The NBA playoffs are here, and you can turn crossovers into cash with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/Blue Wire right now and place a $5 bet, and you'll get an instant $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel always has great promotions every single day. It's a safe and secure app, and you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Just go to FanDuel.com/Blue Wire and sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369 in New York. 21 or older and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342, Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat, Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT, Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com, Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP, Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700, Wyoming, or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net, West Virginia.
Just a reminder, if you have not yet visited Nudge Printing, it is an excellent place to get Spartan gear run by MSU alums. They actually take care of all of our merchandise. So if you want to buy a logoed hoodie or t-shirt for the Final Fours on the Schedule, you can go to our website at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/merchandise. There you can have ability to buy the t-shirt or the hoodie. It takes you right to the Nudge Printing. You can get 20% off by typing in Final Four at checkout. All the proceeds for those shirts go towards us. Everything else goes to Nudge Printing. And so I'd encourage you to check out their stuff. It's fantastic, high quality apparel. They've got decals. They've got, I think Rod got a bunch of big giant wall stickers and stuff that you can put in your man cave or your Spartan room or whatever it might be. You can't go wrong with Nudge Printing. Again, I've got all their stuff and it's super. And they were instrumental in helping along with the shooting victims with the Spartan Strong project, printing tens of thousands of shirts, and over $150,000 went towards the fund. Also, if you're dealing with water, we were talking about jumping in a lake. If you want to take care of the gutters in your house, make sure you head on over to the brothers that just do gutters on the west side of the state, Grand Rapids area. Kurt Stauffer and his team will take care of things. They can replace, clean, or repair any problems you have with your gutters. They can check things out. You get 10% off by saying Final Four. You can email him at kurt.stauffer. That's kurt.stauffer at brothersgutters.com. They just do gutters. They specialize only in that. It's something you can easily overlook, but it's someone you want to make sure they know what they're doing. Professional crew, work quickly any time of the year. They took care of my gutters in February when it was even raining and kind of like a typical Michigan February weather. So you won't go wrong by going with brothers that just do gutters with Kurt Stauffer and his team. One of the things going back to the discussion here, talking about, when it comes to looking at I guess before we even go to 2024 lineup, just looking at where McCulloch fits into this team, we're talking about 2024. So at that point, Malik Hall is definitely gone. So and I presume he's playing the 4 this year. And so at the 4 spot, you've got maybe one of the current centers, like you've got a Kohler or Cooper potentially playing there, Carr and Booker, right? And I'm assuming, as much as we can assume any of the future is possible, right? So McCulloch probably slots into that spot there. And so he's not going to be expected to do a lot right from the start, but there should be opportunity for him to make it onto the court and have meaningful minutes if he's, shows that he can do the things that you need to do, rebound and defend, namely start.
You're asking, does he have that potential?
I mean, do you see that as sort of that's where you vision him? I mean, he's playing the 4 probably. Yeah. Because the 5 is going to still be pretty crowded. Yeah. But there's still a potential for him making it on the floor. It's not like he's going to be sitting on the bench all the time.
It so much is unknown in terms of, well, who's back? Is Booker back for a second season? Right. Where do they add somebody else? I can tell you they're still recruiting bigger players. I mean, it was just this morning, there was a note from one of the guys who covers recruiting that Michigan State is going to be in this weekend, because this weekend is the kickoff of AAU season. They're going to be in to see Tyler McKinley, who is another Ohio kid, along with Ohio State, Tennessee, Cincinnati, Xavier. And, he's like 6'9"ish, definitely more of a 4 than a 5, but so there's still, it'll be interesting to see. And I said this in our last recruiting episode. This weekend is where you're going to start, and it's not finished by any means, but this is where you're going to start to see who else is Michigan State prioritizing. So right now, you've got a pure scoring wing in Teng, and you've got McCulloch, who's, I think, primarily a stretch 4 type, maybe could play small ball 5 at some point. That's the potential. So those are the 2 pieces you've got in this class. Who else do they add? I think that's going to be, we start to find out the beginning of the answers to that question this weekend when you look at who they're viewing, who they're going to spend time on. Now, interestingly, I've seen, several indications of 2025s that they're going to be viewing this weekend. So guys like I mentioned, Sisley and Harrelson, well, they play with McCulloch, so that's no surprise that Michigan State would be watching them. But there's a kid from Northern Kentucky, the Cincinnati area, EJ Walker, who's a 6'8" perimeter guy, who I haven't seen Michigan State mentioned with in a while. They were last fall, and then it kind of went, he took a visit, unofficial, and then it kind of went quiet. Well, apparently the claim is they're going to be out to see him this weekend. So there's him. There's a Patterson kid from Ohio. He's a 6'5" combo guard type in the 2025 class, an elite recruit. He's another one that they're on top of. So it's all speculative right now. We know the guys that they've offered. We know the guys that they've been mentioned with, but the rubber starts to hit the road this weekend, because then you can start saying, okay, they had coaches at this guy's game. That's where you start to get a really good indication of how serious they are. And the great thing is, because they've already got 2 guys in this class, they're not in scramble mode. I can tell you that.
Sure.
I would assume that they're probably looking at a 4-man class again. I don't think you necessarily want to go bigger than that. I mean, Izzo talked in that Seth Davis piece today about how, he emphasized things that we've heard him say. They shouldn't be news to any Michigan State fan, that he plans on continuing to develop his program. The backbone of it is going to be high school recruiting. And he talked about how some coaches seem to be shying away from that now, and he has no plans to. And by the way, there are valid reasons why I don't think a coach is insane for looking at it that way. We've mentioned this before. If you look at last year's top 100 high school players, top 100 recruits, and see how many of them made major impacts, I mean, double-digit scoring, that kind of thing, with their college program, it was relatively few.
Yeah.
Whereas transfers, it was a much, much higher number. So I get that. The problem is that's not where the analysis can really stop, because all that tells you is the individual counting stats that were compiled by a player. They don't tell you anything about your team, the value of continuity and having guys together year after year after year. They don't tell you about team chemistry. They don't tell you about how different pieces fit. And yeah, you might have a top 100 freshman. Michigan State, if you look at Michigan State's class, they had 2 top 100 freshmen last year, Jackson Kohler, Trey Holloman. Neither one of them came close to averaging double digits. I'm not sure that Trey ever scored double digits in a game. Jackson did, but not a lot. But those guys, you could never predict. Might they transfer next week? Yeah, they might. But if we assume that Tom Izzo is able to continue keeping guys around for multi-year development, I think anybody writing off the possibility of those guys, or Carson Cooper, who wasn't even ranked in the top 100, to be major contributors at some point at Michigan State would be crazy to say that can't happen, And so it's just a very different way of approaching this stuff. But I do think Michigan State now, with 2 guys committed, is operating once again from a position of strength, because not only does it mean they can be more selective and focus in more on guys they really want in the 24 class, but they're also really able to focus on 25 and maybe even 26 in a way that you wouldn't be otherwise, you know? And again, that's true for Michigan State because Izzo wants to continue to build through high school classes. I mean, other coaches could say, hey, we don't need to get anybody from the high school class. You know, we're going to fill our team up with the portal, and a lot of them will. You know, but Izzo's going about it a different way, and you know, we're gonna see how it works as this year and successive seasons unfold. But I'm pretty confident that he's got the picture that he wants right now for his program. And if that guy's happy with the way things are going, you have to feel pretty good as a Michigan State fan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
right. I mean, it's an understatement
of years to say, you know, if you can trust that his evaluation talent and how he's constructing his roster.
Some dopes need that said over and over and over. Anybody complaining about Jesse McCulloch being ranked 91 and this guy good, is barely a top 100. How many times do you have to be beaten over the head with the mallet of truth to figure out that that's a moronic way to look at this stuff? I don't know, but some people it's like people who, you know, continue to have to beat their head against a wall. They keep needing to get smacked.
Some people just like to complain. We all know those people. We live amongst them. We work with them, and they just, you know, they just kind of drag you down. You know, in looking at the 2024, when we had the previous discussion after with the Kur Teng commitment, you know, we're looking at the targets and people who are in the same sort of ballpark. You already mentioned Tyler McKinley and the fact that maybe a little surprisingly, they're still looking at him. You kind of wondered what would happen with McCulloch if that they would sort of move to a different position, sort of, you know. But Badanga, as you mentioned also previously, 6'10", clearly a center. He's not a guy who's not a stretch four. So he is someone you still would, and he's a top 5 recruit. So he's definitely someone you would look to try and bring in.
Badanga?
Badanga, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But again, I'm going to be interested to see is Michigan State out there this weekend. I presume, you know, what's interesting about, and I think I talked about this on our last recruiting episode, in years past, Michigan State would occasionally make appearances at the Adidas events or Under Armour events because they've had guys who played for those teams, but far less common than EYBL. And that happened for a couple of reasons. One is the Nike circuit always has the largest number of high-level players. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
Michigan State is a Nike school. And while I certainly don't have any reason to believe that Nike was funneling kids to Michigan State, because I don't think that's the case, I do think that sometimes it can work the other way. And if you're a Nike school, you know that if a kid is playing for an Adidas AAU program, especially the way things happened, you know, prior to the FBI sting,
right? Yeah.
You would know that, you know, your odds might not be very good that you'd be able to land such a kid, you know. But Michigan State is in the 24 and 25 class a lot of guys who play for AAU programs, Adidas AAU programs, I should say, including Kur Teng, plays for Massachusetts Rivals. They're an Adidas program. So I think it's very likely Michigan State will be out there. Flory Badanga plays for Indiana Elite, which is the flagship Adidas program in Indiana for AAU. And I would expect that they would be watching him, but it will tell us something about how they feel if we were to not see them watching him. Again, I'd be kind of surprised by that, but you know, right now the indications are that Indiana would probably be your betting favorite, but you know, he's taken an official to Michigan State in the fall. I'd be surprised to not see Michigan State in there, at least at this stage, and we'll see what happens. But truthfully, he's the only pure, true 5-man that they've offered thus far. That could change.
And then the other name we talked about before is Aiden Sherrill from
Yeah.
the 6'10" guy from Detroit. Looks like he's probably end up in Alabama, top 30 guy.
Well,
So does McCulloch, affect that or
I would
or
have
not,
I
do you
would
think?
have thought so, but the fact that they're already indicating they're going to see McKinley. Now McKinley's a little different than these other guys in that it's maybe easier to see possibilities for him to play a big wing as well, which might explain why they're still looking to focus on him. Maybe it'd be interesting to me to see if they're showing up at Sherrill's games. Now they might anyway, because Sherrill is AAU teammates, I believe, with Jace Richardson. They both play. I'm pretty sure they both play for Vegas Elite, which is a Nike EYBL team. So again, it'll be interesting to see. The thing that's interesting about Sherrill and Alabama is, Alabama's lost all three of their assistant coaches. They all got hired
I didn't
for
follow
head
that.
coaching
Okay.
jobs. So it's an entirely new staff for Nate Oates. What kind of disruption might there be as a result of that? Who knows? But yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, Sherrill's a guy that I could actually see being more of a 5-man, maybe even than McCulloch, but I don't know if he wants to be that. So who knows? But yeah, very interesting whether we'll see Michigan State showing up at his games.
And it's so tricky too at this point. I mean, for one thing, to put this all out obvious, the obvious thing is that these are commitments. These are not actually.
They haven't signed letters of intent. Right.
So they can change and reopen the recruitment, et cetera. And as we've seen this year, even if you have a letter of intent, you can get asked to get released from it for various reasons. And so we've seen that from a number of high profile programs.
I got to say, I would, particularly for next year, I would be kind of surprised to see that issue be a big one for Michigan State. And honestly, for as much talk as we gave it, maybe there are some that have slipped under my radar, but the last I knew, I think there have been 3 instances of that, at least with, like top 100 kids where they asked to get out. Yeah. So it's not like this isn't football. This isn't this, flipping at the last minute.
Right.
You see it in basketball, but you don't see it with anywhere near the frequency that you see it in football. So we should be careful not to make it too big of a deal. I look at Michigan State, next year, and it's hard to know for sure, but the fact of the matter is the only 2 guys that would even be eligible to take a COVID year would be Hogard and Sissoko. Right. So for a kid like Kur Teng or a kid like Jesse McCulloch, I don't think either of those would probably have much of an impact. It might theoretically on someone else that's yet to be committed, but or
someone already on the team,
someone already on the team, I guess. Yeah. But there's plenty of time for all that to get worked out. I don't think I'd be kind of surprised to see Michigan State suffer a rash of that kind of stuff, but I guess you never know.
No, you don't. And certainly you're more likely to, I feel like you're more likely to see that with, early than later. Like I don't expect a lot of departures from the team unless someone is obviously like on the outs, like a Pierre Brooks, for instance. He clearly wasn't going to get any playing time. And so you wouldn't see anyone leave, right away. I don't think,
look, it's a weird period we're going through as we all, meaning fans, coaches, players, everybody tries to adjust to this new era. So I'm certainly not one that thinks, well, Tom Izzo's just immune from this. I mean, it could happen to him, but I do think regardless of when and if it happens, he's a guy who is going to put Michigan State in the best realistic position to minimize that kind of stuff happening. That I'm confident in saying.
Yeah. And, in some respects, the way that Michigan State's running their program now, which is in contrast to a lot of teams, the fact that you talk about high school recruitment, I mean, that takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of time. It's obviously much easier getting portal players. And so, Michigan State has the resources that some other programs may not have, but it certainly allows you the opportunity to develop a program where you're not going to have as many holes. Like, it gives you, it's certainly an advantage, right? Like in many ways, you're now, there are less fish swimming that sea that are going after this high school recruits, probably, right? And so it's probably a little bit easier for you to get better players.
That's what Izzo said. That's what Izzo said in his in that article today with Seth Davis. I'm not sure yet that I see quite the evidence of that, but he would know better than I would. That's for sure. It's again with an understatement. Well, right. What would be really interesting, and I'm really, it's unfortunate. I've been looking at the schedules, and I really want to get out to one of the Nike stops again this year, which listeners know I've done in the past. I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not, but it would be fascinating to see, because traditionally those things are basically glorified coaching conventions. Like when I've gone to the Indianapolis stop in the past, it's name a high profile head coach. And in fact, I can tell you the last time I was there was the spring just before Thad Matta got fired, whatever Ohio State wants to call it, later that summer. Thad Matta really was notable for not being there because of his health. But everybody else, you name them, they were there. And it would be fascinating to see, is that still the case? You know, for example, Izzo mentioned he didn't go to the Final Four this year. That's another one of these events that's well known as essentially a coaching convention, you know, but he didn't go. And I don't think he was alone in that, because he said he felt like he needed to be in East Lansing. And and that was just basically not because he was going to be necessarily recruiting guys in the portal, but he felt he needed to be around town to make sure that he was able to retain his own guys.
Yeah. Retention.
You know?
Versus recruitment.
And so that's another reason why do coaches still go to these shoe company events with the same fervor that they used to? It will be interesting to see how that plays out, but you know, it is possible that MSU has a little more of an open playing field with some of these guys. I mean, honestly, if you're talking about a Flory Bedinga, that recruitment's going to be as crazy as it would have been at any other point for a guy similarly ranked. Yeah. The guys at the high end, I don't think much is going to change. But, you know, if you're talking about a guy who's maybe back end of the top 100, you know, has potential, but maybe hasn't been fully realized yet, is it as crazy? Maybe not.
Yeah.
You know, everything's in transition in the sport, you know?
Yeah. You get an offer. If you're a high school player, you better think twice about waiting and seeing what else you get, because there may not be another offer coming.
You know, in Jesse McCulloch's case, that's a good example, I think, of this. I'm not sure that's what motivated him, but you know, he didn't wait. And sometimes in the past, and again, I'm not saying anything about him, I'm just saying guys that were similarly ranked with, you know, a lot of potential, maybe haven't been seen by everybody yet. He's got very good offers, but he doesn't have offers from everybody. You know, he doesn't have Duke, Kentucky. He doesn't have all those programs.
Kansas, yeah.
Basically, his recruitment is an upper Midwest recruitment. I mean, you know, Alabama was an exception, but Nate Oates recruits a lot of guys this part of the country, and Virginia Tech was an outlier, but Xavier, Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, it had that flavor. Sometimes in the past, guys would hold off because they'd want to at least go through the bulk of the AAU season to be seen, to try to get their ranking boosted. And part of that sometimes is a result of additional schools coming in and offering you, you know, it was always this,
raise your profile.
Yeah. It was this complicated ecosystem, but the incentivization oftentimes seemed to be in the weight category, right? Keep playing, raise your profile, see what happens. I don't know if that's a smart move anymore. I think if you find a place that wants you and you fit and you like it, you're probably well advised to take it, because it's not like a kid like Jesse McCulloch wouldn't have good options. He would, but if he waits too long, they might not be the preferred one.
Right.
know?
Yeah. You might end up your second or third choice,
Yeah.
which may not have the same opportunity.
That's
for sure.
very, very possible. And the longer you wait, the more of an opportunity you give coaches to look at it and say, you know what? This is going to be a developmental deal. And maybe this kid, there's risk this kid doesn't come along the way we think he might. I'm better off just keep my powder dry and waiting till the spring and seeing what's in the portal. And maybe I get somebody who's more ready made to help me next year,
Yeah.
And then timelines are part of it too, because a coach could say, well, this is a player I like, but I figure it's going to take at least 2 years for him to be good enough to get on the court regularly for us, versus I can go in the portal and get a guy who's ready to help me tomorrow.
Or you could go and get someone who's a sophomore right now, and you're getting 2 or 3 years out of that player. And now that player that's going to be next year, well, you don't have room for them anymore.
That
right?
too.
I mean, it's the same
that
thing.
Too.
Yeah.
Just it's very complicated, and very little of it seems to cut in favor of high school players outside of the elite category, where anybody would take them.
Right. Well, and, looking at the team, I mean, we're a long ways from May 11th. I mean, it's not that far, but it is a long ways. Like, all kinds of things can happen. People can still enter the portal from here, although there's no reason for us to believe that that's going to happen at this point. And that some people could still look at the draft.
I'm going to differ on that a little bit. Only
for Michigan State?
Only because of the finality of the words "no reason."
Right.
I have heard things for sure, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I've heard them from people who know what's up generally. On the other hand, nothing's happened. There doesn't seem to be any obvious indication or word circulating that anything is imminent, which oftentimes, though not always, there is, if something's going to happen, So right now, as we sit here on April 20th, all clear, but I'm not counting it as done. I'll get back to you, and we will talk about Michigan State in a solidified manner when May 11th comes and goes. And that's assuming that nobody decides to enter the draft to get evaluated.
Right. That's the other thing too.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the only point I was going to make, and actually is not even about that, with that sort of semi-ominous statement, where at least not as reassuring as, you'd hope it'd be.
I don't want to be ominous. And look,
I know. I don't want to be, I don't mean to give that impression that you think there's something's going to happen, but just that there's no certainty.
Right. Just to be clear, just because there are things out there does not mean that they happen. It just means that you hear things, you say, well, okay, that suggests that maybe there's a possibility that the roster might look different than it does. I mean, I can tell you right now, we'll see whether it's valid or not, but I see some of these people that cover Michigan that are saying it's not even clear that the team they have today on paper is going to be the team they have in November, by which they mean it's not clear that the portal guys who have committed there will actually be there.
Yeah,
in the fall.
So that was 2 days ago that we put that show, and it still seems to have changed a ton since then.
Yeah. So you just can't know. Do I feel good about where Michigan State's at on balance? Yes, I do. Do I think that if I had a gun to my head from everything I've heard, would I think that the roster we think they're going to have is the one they'll have? Yeah. Gun to my head, I'd probably say yes, but that doesn't mean 100%.
Yeah. Well, my only point was that looking at the roster right now and the way it's constructed, again, assuming everything stays the same, I don't feel like this team has a lot of holes going from year to year for a couple of years, where you feel like, oh, there's a glaring problem. Like, I think, clearly this year there was a problem at the 5, which was, largely okay. But, and there was, before that, there was a point guard problem. I feel like a lot of maybe some years had maybe a little thin at the wings. I feel like there's not really any obvious glaring problems going forward. Again, assuming everyone sort of progresses as you'd expect, so the team seems to be set up pretty well from a roster standpoint, I think, for a couple of years.
I'm not sure that I can go there, because I don't know what that roster is going to look like next year.
Well, no, I totally, yes.
Year,
and I
yes.
all the caveats, all the
season,
asterisks you need.
This coming season, yeah, absolutely. But after that, who's around? I mean,
Yeah.
okay,
No, I know.
Jaden Akins theoretically could be around for a senior year. I don't expect him
I
to
assume
be.
he's gone. Yeah, I assume he's gone, and Malik Hall and
Malik
Walker
Hall and
obviously are
Tyson
gone.
Walker are gone for sure.
Right. Those you assume, and then
Hogard could
but
come
who
back,
knows?
but
Yeah.
maybe not. And then if he did come back, does that mean, somebody like Jeremy Fierce say, I'm not waiting another year to have the keys handed? I mean, it's just too, look.
Oh, yeah.
What Michigan said, the furthest I'm prepared to go is Michigan State seems to be getting guys who fit their profile of what they want and who look like they have potential to be very productive players. That's as much as you can say.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and I guess the only thing I'd add to that is that, when you look at it compared to, say, a Michigan, which seems to have creators everywhere throughout their roster and just like a lot of chaos.
But that's the thing. They've got.
I just don't feel like
they got craters this year, which is all you can really look at. Beyond that,
right? But
it's a mess. Who the hell knows?
But they've had creators, right? This is not the first time this has happened. They seem like a much shakier foundation program from a roster construction than Michigan State.
That I agree with.
Another example of that.
And that I agree with. And there's a good reason why, which maybe is, maybe I was fighting you on this and I shouldn't have been. If the point is that I'd put it this way. Once you get on the portal path, it's hard to get off.
Yeah, you're a junkie.
And but the reason for it is a very simple one. If you're bringing in grad transfers or a transfer where it's pretty likely that whatever their eligibility is, they're going to do 1 year and then they're going pro. Say a Terrence Shannon scenario.
Sure.
Well, then you got to replace them the next year, And if you've got a lot of those guys, say you've got like Illinois had this year, where you got a slew of them. You can't. Nobody, not even Tom Izzo, is going to bring in a 6 or 7 man freshman class. So
absolutely,
it means you have no choice but to go back into the portal to replace the portal guys you had. And then the cycle keeps repeating. And that's what I mean by once you go down that path of heavy portal. I like I said, I think in our last episode about recruiting, I'm going to be really interested to see, or maybe it was our Big Ten stuff. I'm going to be really interested to see Kansas State, what that team looks like, because that was an extreme situation. Another one that's really extreme in the Big Ten or is going to be, and I saw they signed a kid from Temple today, Penn State. Out of necessity, Penn State's going to be absolutely loaded with portal guys. Now, the one thing you can do now, which you didn't used to be able to do, is if you get portal guys who are, say, sophomores or juniors, well, they can be like Tyson Walker or Joey Hauser was. The reason Michigan State's not on that path is the transfers they did take were multi-year guys. They weren't one and done, So if you can do it that way, then you got a chance to maybe alleviate some of these concerns. But if that's your point, that Michigan State is on a more solid footing to retain some type of continuity, absolutely. And, and Tom Izzo has very clearly said that is what he wants to do. He wants to continue having the same kind of program he's always had, which is he brings in young guys who are able to be mentored by the older guys on the roster, and then the pattern repeats. Those young guys become the older guys who mentor the next group of young guys. He wants that kind of continuity. When you've got, 7, 8 new guys coming in every year, it's really hard to do that. Really hard.
Yeah, I can't even imagine Tom Izzo being successful doing that. Like even the way he coaches and constructs a team, but I just can't even see how he could pull it off.
Look at it this way. If you look at the guys who have been transfers at Michigan State, and I'm not even talking just the modern era. I'm talking, long term. Mike Chappelle was the first one. And let me go back. DeJuan Wiley, who was a JUCO transfer and was in the first class he had. DeJuan Wiley didn't really start to figure it out and to become an impact guy until the back half of his second year at Michigan State. And I've heard Izzo say he hates the idea that he only got to coach DeJuan Wiley for 2 years, because basically it took a year and a half for him to get it. And then once he did, it was over. Mike Chappelle never quite made good on his potential. He was an elite recruit, started his career at Duke, came to Michigan State after that, but was an important part of two very good teams, but never became a star. But then I think about a guy like Bryn Forbes, pretty good his first year at Michigan State. He was a guy who played regularly, definitely had an important role in the team, but he was way beyond that his second year. He was great, right? So it took him a year to acclimate. Joey Hauser really took him 2 years to acclimate. Tyson Walker took him a year, so we see this pattern. I think that you're not wrong at all to suggest that this one and done, whether it's freshmen or transfers, either way, guys coming in for a year and then they're gone, that is not a pattern. It's not an approach where Izzo's likely to be hugely successful. We don't have a lot of evidence that that's going to be a winning formula for him,
Right.
So I think it's, and I would suspect that if and when he has to go into the portal, I would not be surprised to see them try to continue that process where they might take somebody in, but they're going to take somebody in who's got at least a couple of years of eligibility left.
Yeah, I think so.
Because they're going to figure, year one, they hopefully they're going to be able to help us, but they're not really going to hit their stride until year two.
Yeah. You can imagine the only ones that are going to do that is someone they really know well that they recruited potentially.
Right.
But even then, you still have to learn a whole new system. I think we'll wrap it up there. If you have not yet supported the show and you think, boy, I feel kind of guilty. I listen to the show. You guys putting all this content out all the time. I learn more about Michigan State. I wonder if there's a way I could help. Well, you can go to our support page at tffinots.com/support. There you can find ways to one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo. It's a way to assuage your guilt so you don't feel like you're just listening and not giving anything contributing to the community. So you can do one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo, like I said, or you can do a monthly donation through Patreon. We have various levels to donate that give you various benefits. If you want to become a sponsor of the show and advertise, we have those opportunities as well. You can just get a hold of me at eric@tffinots.com, and we can discuss whatever it is you're interested in. And then I guess the final reminder for other sponsors of the show, Nudge Printing. Go to nudgeprinting.com, 20% off purchase by entering Final Four as one word into the coupon code. And then also the brothers at Just Do Gutters on the west side of the state, Grand Rapids, Holland, Saugatuck, Rockford, Lowell area. You contact Kurt and his team and get 10% off your gutter work just by mentioning Final Four. All right, so until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.